Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Jason Ortitay of the 46th District in Allegheny and Washington counties. On today's program, we'll be learning more about the state archives. In addition to housing some of our Commonwealth's most treasured historical documents, the Archives building in Harrisburg is open for citizens to research topics of interest, including their own family histories. I am honored to have our state archivist, David Carmicheal, as my guest today. He's here to highlight the collection of the state archives and to help us understand its value to all Pennsylvanians. Mr. Carmicheal, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here today. We've had a few questions back home about the state archives and just wanted to give you the opportunity to tell us what you guys do.
Thank you very much, because it's not something that people know an awful lot about. So I like to describe it in anybody's home. They have certain records that they don't need to keep. You get an advertisement, you throw it away. You pay your electric bill, you might throw the bill away after you pay it. But there are certain records that you keep at home because they're so treasured. You have family photographs, and you have the deed to your property, and you have other things. The state archives does for the state government what you do at home with your treasured documents. We identify the ones that we want to keep forever, and then we keep them forever.
It's kind of like my grandmother has a bunch of old certificates and stuff from school from my dad. They're in a cedar chest.
That's right. That's
so
right.
I'm sure you guys do something similar.
Ours is in a tall white tower, but it's the same idea where we keep them in proper temperature and humidity, and we protect them so that when people use them, they're monitored and that sort of thing. And we collect anything from things like photographs, like you do your family photographs, to property records of property that the Commonwealth owns, for instance, the legal records that the Commonwealth needs to keep forever.
So you guys take care of all kinds of documents,
We do.
ranging from pictures to family ancestry.
We do.
Tell me a little bit more about some of your favorite documents out there, because a lot of people, that's usually what catches their eyes.
That's right.
What do you have there that's really cool?
That's right. Well, we have 250 million documents, we estimate, so it's very hard to choose a favorite, I would say. We just finished exhibiting the charter, Penn's charter, so we have the original 1681 document that established Pennsylvania, and that, of course, is document number 1 in our collection. So that is certainly a favorite. But we have a lot of different kinds of documents. We have about 1 million photographs and maps. In fact, I brought a map here to show you if you'd like to take a look.
Absolutely.
Sort of an example of one of our maps. These are called the Mellish-Whiteside maps. And this was the first official atlas of the counties of Pennsylvania. They were done about 1815 to 1821. And the legislature paid to have these counties surveyed and the maps done. And this, of course, includes part of your district. You probably would recognize some of the areas on here.
Very familiar.
So a lot of people come to look at maps, certainly. We have land records that go back to William Penn. And as you say, family history, many family history documents, military records. I've got a few more to show you as we progress along.
Of course. Well, while we're talking about family history, you guys recently did a project with Ancestry.com. I'd love to hear about that.
We did. We worked with Ancestry.com at no cost to the taxpayers in Pennsylvania, which is the part, as a taxpayer, I love that part,
We love that.
Yes, you like to hear that. We calculate that we've saved the Commonwealth about $1.5 million in scanning costs. And Ancestry scanned the documents for us for free, and they were things like birth records, marriage records, military records. We now have, through them, we have about 13 million documents online. And the records are on Ancestry.com, but if you come through the Pennsylvania State Archives website and you are Pennsylvanian, you can access the Pennsylvania records free of charge. So it's free to Pennsylvanians to get to our record.
That's an important note out there for everybody who's watching. It's free.
It is.
So take advantage of it.
It is. And we, because of online access, the number of people who travel to Harrisburg and come into our search room has declined over the past decade, obviously, as things are online. But last year, we estimate that we served about 4.1 million people, both online and in person. And so as the numbers stop coming to the research room, the numbers who are just sitting at home using our records is just growing exponentially.
That's really important. It's 3 to 4 hours to get here from my district, and so
is.
it's a lot easier for people to just, hey, dial up the keyboard and see what's in there.
That's our goal, and our first goal was to put records online that genealogists use, because a lot of our users are genealogists, and we knew a lot of them were traveling long distances to get to us, so we worked with Ancestry to put those online. But from there, we're moving out to other kinds of collections. We just put a very large collection of World War I posters online. They're beautiful. We use the State Library's Power Library online. And again, free access, and they can be used in classrooms and such. So we're branching out into many other kinds of records.
So those are good tools for people to use back home and in the local schools.
They are.
Their history classes, colleges, community colleges, all those places.
Yes.
Those are good.
That's our goal, really.
Well, we hope to keep that going back home. Now, you said you had some other military documents.
I do. Let me show you two kinds of military records. This one, we have a lot of Civil War records, as you might imagine. And this particular one I brought was of interest to me anyway, because it's a letter from a soldier. Let me move the map out so you can see this a little bit better. And in the letter, toward the end, he's writing to his sister. And toward the end, he says that we're waiting every day to get paid. And when I get paid, I'm going to go have my likeness made and sent to you. And inside the letter was this photograph of the soldier in his military uniform. He was a Zouave, and so he wore a very elaborate military uniform. And we're fairly certain that this was the image he was talking about in the letter.
Now, was this something that somebody donated to the archives, or something you guys were actively out looking for?
It was donated to us, and in addition to gathering the government records that are so important, we are permitted to gather any historical records that tell the history of the state. And so over the years, we have had many, many tens of thousands of records donated to us. And of course, the Civil War was so important to Pennsylvania history that we have a good collection of diaries and letters and photographs and such.
Especially with Gettysburg not too far from here.
Correct.
Are you guys responsible for keeping any of the museums and stuff they have out there, or do you guys share stuff?
We do not collect objects in the archives. Pretty much we collect flat things. So if it's a photograph or a letter or a diary, we collect it. Objects, we work with the State Museum of Pennsylvania, which we are both part of the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. And so we partner on many things, and we loan many of our documents to them for exhibits. And we will loan under certain conditions to other museums. The Heinz History Center often borrows our materials for exhibits.
Now, I want to pause for a second and talk about preservation of documents like this. I mean, the papers, of course, have changed throughout the years, but I don't know if they can see this back home, but you can see the outsides. And you also have the photograph wrapped in plastic. Is this typically how documents come into you? What kind of process are you looking at to preserve these types of things?
Quite often, the records come into us in very bad condition. Even with the government records, we're often retrieving them from warehouses and basements and attics where they've been stored because nobody had room to keep them anywhere. And so quite often, we have to preserve them in some way. We can't afford to take every single document and conserve it perfectly. But we'll take things like this Mellish Whiteside map, and this has been encapsulated in mylar that has no acids in it, and it's not static, so that and it's not actually adhering to the map itself. So if I needed to, I could tear this mylar apart and pull the map out. It's just like it's in an envelope. Here, we did the same thing with the photograph. We just didn't seal all the sides. We're only sealing 2 of the sides to hold the document. There was a time when archives laminated documents, and we do not recommend lamination for anyone because lamination actually melts the plastic into the document. And we have some William Penn documents, some land warrants that were laminated many, many, many decades ago that are deteriorating badly because the plastic was melted in. And so I always urge people, don't laminate your documents. Get some good acid-free Mylar and put them in there. They'll be much safer.
It's a good tip for everybody at home.
That's good. It is.
Well, tell me a little bit more about some of the documents you have. How many do you have, and what's the oldest one that you have?
So we have about, in fact, I'll get a few more out here while we're talking, but we have about 250 million documents. And I need to stop here and say, in addition to the archives, the historical records that we store, the archives also runs the State Record Center. And I just want to mention that because it's an interesting facility. It's a huge warehouse full of records that if we didn't have that warehouse, the records would be in state government offices, getting in the way and stacked up in hallways and every place else. And so we take records that have to be kept for a period of time, and we put them in this warehouse. We estimate that we have about 900 million documents in that warehouse right now. So we take care of a lot of paper for the government. We also urge the agencies to scan a lot of this material. We're not afraid of electronic records in that sense. So the archives proper, the historical records, there are about 250 million documents. Many people like to see some of these early records. This was a land warrant signed by William Penn himself. In one sense, all of the property in Pennsylvania and all of the property ownership traces back to documents in the archives. Sometimes they trace back to William Penn himself, sometimes his sons, sometimes they trace back to a treaty with the Native Americans or some other purchase that was done, but you will often find the land records in the archives. This was permission for somebody to purchase a piece of property, and I talked to somebody just the other day who said she was a real estate attorney, and she said she has had to trace properties clear back to the William Penn documents sometimes.
Well, how old is this document
This
here?
one is 1683.
Wow.
So it's a pretty old document. Our oldest document is 1664. It was an agreement between New York and Pennsylvania over some boundary issues. But most of the documents begin with 1681, with Penn's arrival, and move from there.
No, it's cool to see these in person, and cool is an understatement here, because I'm used to seeing these things on TV. I mean, you can't reach out and touch them and actually see them in person, but to actually see these in person is just, it's unreal. This is a part of history, something that's over 300 years, over 300 years old.
It is, and that's one of the reasons, even though we're scanning things and putting them online, we realize a lot of times people want to come and see the original. And the archives is open to the public. Anybody can come and use the archives. We're open Wednesday to Saturday, 9 to 4. And we don't pull the original records on Saturday because it takes extra staff to go up into the tower and get them. But everything else is available. But people can come and look at their documents. I mean, they really own these documents. We're just the custodians and the caretakers of them. So it's great just to come and handle an old document sometimes.
It is. What other documents do you have over there? I'll walk through these ones.
Sure.
I like seeing this stuff.
It's great stuff. So here's another military document. This is someone who was born in Burgettstown, actually. It's a World War II bonus application. And this gets many uses. We have military records that go back to the French and Indian War and up through Vietnam and Desert Storm and such. And this is interesting as a genealogical record because this person is applying for a bonus for having fought in World War II or served in World War II. And on the back, they will list their family members and how old they are and things like that. So a genealogist looking at this can see different family members, children, and that sort of thing. But another use that these documents get is that the Military Personnel Record Center in St. Louis burned down in the 1970s. And World War I, World War II veterans and people after that, even after World War II, Vietnam sometimes, lost their military records. And so every week we get probably 4 or 5 requests to provide evidence that someone served in the military so that they can get burial benefits or other kinds of military benefits. And so we are constantly pulling these up for veterans and serving them in that way.
So these go far back, I would imagine.
They do.
It's like the Civil War.
They do.
And beyond that.
We have muster rolls from the Civil War. We have many, many military records. And again, we're working with Ancestry right now to scan many of those and get them online.
Well, right now we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Did you know that Violet Oakley was the first female artist to receive a large commission for artwork done in a United States Capitol building? In 1902, Joseph Houston, designer and architect for the 3rd Harrisburg Capitol building, commissioned Violet Oakley to paint murals for the governor's reception room. He believed that Oakley's contribution would add interest to the building and act as an encouragement of women of the state. Prior to beginning her work for the Capitol, Oakley set out to England to conduct research for her murals. Upon return, she decided to center her artwork on William Penn and the founding of Pennsylvania. Oakley made sure that Penn's ideals of justice and peace could be seen throughout her work. In 1906, she completed 13 murals titled The Founding of the State of Liberty Spiritual and was placed in sequential order around the governor's reception room. These murals were some of the first to be installed in the Capitol. When Edwin Austin Abbey, another artist for the Capitol, died in 1911, Oakley was offered another opportunity to create murals for the unfinished Senate and Supreme Court chambers. Her work on the Senate murals, including International Understanding, was completed by 1919. Oakley then completed the Supreme Court murals, including the Divine Law, by 1927. Oakley is said to be the principal artist for the Capitol, with a total of 43 murals on display. She remains one of the greatest muralists in the United States. Now you know.
Did you know the Avenue of Flags presentation at Indiantown Gap National Cemetery has over 500 casket flags? Among the flags displayed are Commonwealth, territorial, and military flags. The flags are tied to 20-foot poles spaced 40 feet apart on both sides of the main drive of the cemetery. It takes about 2 hours to set up and take down all of the flags. Volunteers are encouraged to help with this task and must be at least 13 years of age. All of the flags are donated to the Avenue of Flags by families of the deceased. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. I'm State Representative Jason Ortitay. My guest today is State Archivist David Carmicheal. David, welcome back from the break.
Thank you.
We were talking a little bit through the break about some of the other documents you have, and we'll jump right in. For the folks at home, we just finished up talking about a World War II bonus application here with a gentleman from Burgettstown, and I see some reference to McDonald as well.
Right.
For the people back home. Even the person on the back, we saw Robert Cassidy, who was the notary there, and I believe one of his family members may still carry that on back
Probably
home.
true. In Pennsylvania, that often happens, but these are terrific records for doing research, family research, but also just for seeing the history of the community. And as you had said before the break, we have records of military service that go back to the very earliest period of the Commonwealth. So these are very important records, especially even for living veterans. These can be very important. Now we have some other records here that are not quite as what shall we say, solemn as those. But we also, because people have donated many documents, we have many postcards. We have probably 1 million photographs and postcards here. And again, we pulled out a few from areas that you're probably very familiar with.
Yes.
And people use them to see, for instance, how towns have changed, or maybe they're restoring a building such as this one and they need to see what it looked like at a certain period. And so we get a lot of use out of these.
I feel like I've seen this picture here in McDonald. You can see the oil derricks there. And I think a lot of people have this picture back at home. It's a very popular one.
Quite often when there was a photograph that popular, they would make postcards of it, and maybe 5 or 6 companies would make postcards of it. They were very popular at one time. And then this one is even 3-dimensional. I said we only collect flat things, but it does have a heart that is sewn onto it and glued there to say the heart of McDonald, Pennsylvania.
Well, this goes great because I know back at home, McDonald has it's a McDonald History Facebook page where people are constantly posting pictures. And a lot of what I've seen has been in the early 1900s, and some, I think, back as far as the late 1800s. So, I mean, for the folks back at home, they do have this stuff here available at the state. So, I mean, if you're looking for things, you should check here.
And we welcome people to contact us about these things. So those are some postcards. I've got 1 or 2 more documents here that might interest you. One of them is very early, 1854, as I recall. And it was the laying out of a state road that, again, runs through an area that you're familiar with. Now, they went along and they drew out, I'm going to turn to a different page here, although they're all wonderful, I think, but on the one side, they're showing the survey markings and such. On the other, they often show where people live, who lives where, and where the property lines are. And they're not exact to the nth degree, but they would draw little buildings in here as they were laying this road out, and the right-of-way for the road. And here's the town showing up, Burgettstown showing up in here. And so as you go through these, you get a very interesting picture. These are all hand-drawn in the 1850s. This one has been protected with a very thin layer of, it's like a paper, a rice paper that was laid on top of it. But you can see all the little buildings that they've drawn in. And I brought another map, and I don't know that the viewers will be able to see this as clearly, but this sort of shows where that road runs today. And it's very closely aligned with roads that we have today. Because,
is that West Middletown all the way up through, looks like the Robinson Township in Washington County?
Right, that's right. Part of it runs along Route 18 here, you can see. So quite often they would lay out these roads along the paths that the Native Americans had used, and so our roads follow paths that are very, very ancient by American standards.
Yeah, deer trails and Native American trails.
So again, records that we feel have historical value to the state for a very, very long time. We keep these sorts of records.
Very cool. Yeah, because this is Smith Township here. I was looking at some of the names, they look familiar to me.
That's right. It's interesting in Pennsylvania how the names can continue for hundreds of years because people settle and they stay there, which is a very good thing about our state.
Yeah, Babington Mills.
Yeah, that's right. So that's just one of the many road documents, canal documents. When they laid out the canals, we have the most beautiful drawings and plans of the canals where they were constructing them. And so we have those railroad records. We have many, many records of the Penn Central Railroad and many other Pennsylvania railroads. Many tens of thousands of cubic feet of those records.
Yeah, because that's a rich part of our history of the railroad.
They are. So transportation is a very large thing in Pennsylvania, obviously. We even have turnpike records. So you can begin with these laying out of these roads and the canals and the railroads, but even up to the modern highways, we collect those records as well. And lest you think that all of our records are old, I also brought one last record that is just to show that historical records can be collected even when they're fairly new. And so this is a record from 1985. It is the Department of Environmental Resources, and it's actually it was beginning of a court case with the Burgettstown Area School District. The school district was being accused of running a coal mine without proper permits. The coal mine was on the school property. And so the DEP was coming in and saying, you're not following the rules for running a coal mine. I just sort of had this vision of kids being sent at recess to go work at the coal mine. It wasn't quite like that from what I understand. But eventually the school district settled this with DEP without going to court. But again, these are the sorts of documents someone might come back years from now and say, what happened in that case? What was the agreement? And so we gather these records even when they're fairly new so that we can protect them for hundreds of years before they become really old and difficult to maintain.
Now, I am very familiar with this. I know exactly where this is at. I think I drive by it a lot, so
I'm sure you do.
It's very interesting to see and hear about this. I mean, when this happened, of course, I think I was 1, so I mean, obviously wasn't too coherent about what was going on.
I was a little older than that, but I didn't live in Pennsylvania in '85, so I didn't know. That's interesting.
Well, we talked about some of the local areas. What kind of services do you guys provide to local governments?
So one of the best things we do for local governments is they still produce microfilm backup of many of their most vital records. We take that microfilm and we store it for them. So if there's a major disaster and the deeds get wiped out or the mortgages get wiped out or whatever else has been filed with the county, we have a microfilm backup of those things. We're working on standards right now so that those backups could be in electronic form. As you might appreciate, the electronic records are much harder to keep alive for hundreds of years. The hardware changes, the software changes, and so microfilm is still actually a very good backup medium for protection. So we do that. We also will train them to care for their records, and we go out and hold workshops and such for them.
Well, switching gears a little bit, I had someone from your office come into my office maybe shortly after being elected, and they said they collect a lot of the legislature's notes and documents. And one specific case had mentioned, I believe it was in the 1800s, maybe the late 1800s, as a state representative was actually removed because he was accused of being a pirate. So I didn't know if you were familiar with that.
I'm not familiar with that case. The legislature actually has an archives of their own that is separate from the state archives, but we work very closely together because we have many of the legislative records and they collect legislative records. And so together, those may be in that archives rather than the state archives. But hopefully we've not had too many pirates over the years.
I would sense that profession has died down
That's right.
over the last 100 or so years.
But the archival profession has not. We just have to keep changing with the times. And we've moved from parchment to paper to electronic records now, which are our biggest challenge. And we hope we'll still be here 500 years from now taking care of these records for the people of Pennsylvania.
We hope so too. Now we have a few minutes left. I just want to talk about some of the your personal favorite documents. I know we asked you earlier what your favorite document was, but if you can kind of just give me a handful of the ones that you really enjoy and that you like.
Sure. Well, my grandmother grew up in Bellefonte, and so I like almost any record that has to do with Bellefonte. And I've found postcards and other kinds of maps and things like that. One of my favorite records is a very odd one. The Eastern State Penitentiary in the late 19th century had a book where they registered all the different inmates and what their marital status was and whether they drank or whether they were sober and all this stuff. And the man who kept that book for several years did the most ornate drawings to illustrate the pages that he was doing. And it just has always struck me as an odd thing for a government record to have such beautiful artwork around the margins. And he was a prisoner, and this was how he occupied his time. So I love that document. But it's hard for me to find a document I don't love. That's why I went into this profession.
Now, the Constitution is obviously a big thing in the state. Have you personally, I would imagine you've at least seen it.
I have, indeed. We have all the constitutions of the state, beginning with 1776. And our Constitution, of course, even going back to the first frame of government of 1682 that William Penn created, which formed the basis of a lot of democracy in this country. And we have that document as well. So we have a good history of these constitutions of Pennsylvania. And recently we've been doing some research for the legislature into the 1968 Constitution, for instance. So these records don't just get put on a shelf and sit there. I mean, we're constantly using them for people to make decisions, to help answer questions, and it's a very important thing.
Now, are any of these on display over in the archives?
We do periodic displays in the State Museum. They have good places to display documents, so we have that. And we have a number of other like facsimiles that we put out in different places. But the museum, we're trying to do a regular exhibit in the State Museum so that people can see more and more of these documents.
And what's the best way for somebody to get you documents?
Sure. The best way is to contact us through our website. It's pastatearchives.com. And there are email addresses and things in there you can use, and our phone number is there. Or come see us Wednesday through Saturday, 9 to 4.
And you guys are basically right across the street from the Capitol.
We are indeed. That's right.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's program. I'm State Representative Jason Ortitay. If you need any assistance with any state government matter, feel free to contact me at my local office. The address and number will be shown in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join me next time for Legislative Report.